Hello, welcome to our third and final installment of the Maamer that we're learning for Yud Tes Kislev as we approach the great day of Yud Tes Kislev. And so what we'll do is we'll start with Ois Vav and conclude the Maamer, God willing, and then provide a brief synopsis, summarization, and maybe touch on another point. So let's begin with Ois Vav. So similarly, it is in the Aveda, which is B'derech Milchama, that there sheyesh kama v'kama dargis, that there are various levels in the state of Milchama that a particular Aveda may entail. The Milchama shebitfilah, because we have the state of Milchama, which is when one davens, that like it says, Shas Tzleisa, Shas Krava, that the time of davening is a time of a spiritual battle within the mind and heart of a person. Kivan Shibya, because since during the time of davening, even though it's true that it's a time of battle, but the person is in a state that he is not engaged with his personal matters, he's not engaged with matters of the world, but he's a person is engaged with, he's meditating on Inyani Elokus, and he's focused, and his efforts are to arouse within himself a love and fear of Hashem. Ella, so why then is this considered a state of Milchama? Why is this a spiritual battle if a person is in a place that he's completely focused on the spiritual and on godliness and on his love and fear of Hashem? Ella, but since Shai Sponanus Vav V'Yira Tzrichais Li'Spoif and Shia Musagamba Seichel the Nefesh Abahamis, that which are those inyanim that a person meditates upon are tailored to be those that can be understood also to the Nefesh Abahamis as well. So this describes the state that a person is in when they daven. That on the one hand, they're in a place where they're in a spiritual place, meditating on godly matters, working to arouse love and fear of Hashem. On the other hand, they're going about this in a way where they do not forget the Nefesh Abahamis that's within them, but rather they meditate upon subject matter that's relatable, and in a way that's relatable to the Nefesh Abahamis. So this state is kind of a hybrid state, somewhere in between that Einza Milchama Mamish, that on the one hand it's a Milchama, it is a spiritual battle because a person is trying to bring the Nefesh Abahamis to a place where on its own it has no particular interest in going, so he's waging war with his Nefesh Abahamis to convince it and bring it to that place closer to where the Nefesh Elokis itself would like to be. But at the same time, Ein Za Milchama Mamish, it's not an actual Milchama because the person is not engaged in Yanei Ha'olam. But so V'nikra Zeh B'Shem Cherev Shel Shalim. So this is referred to as what we call Cherev Shel Shalim. Cherev Shel Shalim simply means that there's the possibility of one country waging war on another. And then you have a situation where a country wants to go to war with another country, but in order to get there, it has to pass through another country along the way. So the country that it passes through, while it's in its military formation and geared up and so on, but they're not attacking that particular country, that's called Cherev Shel Shalim. So Tefillah, which is that sort of middle state where one is in a state of milchama, but at the same time they're in a spiritual place and not engaged in Yonei Ha'olam. So this is referred to as Cherev Shel Shalim, but it is milchama. But the Cherev Shel Shalim type V'Aveda B'derech Milchama, but then the Aveda which is an actual milchama. Hibikar B'Shas Achila Sh'Siya is primarily when a person engages in things of the world, in matters of the world, like eating and drinking, as it says, Nama Pum Charba Leichel, that the bread is eaten at the edge of a sword, meaning that a person then has to both partake of the physical and at the same time work with difficulty within themselves, that their partaking of the physical should not be seeking the physical pleasure, but rather l'shem shemaim, or b'chol derech hachadeu, and so on. And with that is an actual milchama, because here the person is engaged in physical matters, in consuming and things that can be enjoyable and so on, and yet he has to go about them in the correct way. And similarly in any other of the person's physical needs, that a person has to do them, but do them properly. That's a state of actual milchama. And in this itself, ikra milchama hi b'shas ha'isek b'masa u'matan mischar, that the main milchama is when a person goes about their business affairs, when they do their mischar, because the milchama that goes on when a person eats or for other such physical needs, what the person is trying to achieve and accomplish is, what is he trying to accomplish with the milchama is that a person is investing effort and focus, that his eating should be l'shem shamayim, that his intent should be so that he can be healthy and strong and be able to serve Hashem in an energetic manner. Not that he should be eating in order to just enjoy the physical pleasure of the food. In other words, the person wages war against, and instead of having a state of mind where they're indulging in the taiva and the pleasure of the food, so the person works to suppress that and to focus their mind and their intent to eat l'shem shamayim. So therefore, so the person is suppressing the taiva that can potentially be there, and looking to disengage from that and to go about their eating in a way that is where their kavanah, their intent is only l'shem shamayim. So while that is a milchama, but it doesn't approach the milchama that one has when they conduct their business affairs, because mashen kenais askus b'masa umatan, because when a person engages in whatever it is, in their masa umatan, in their business and professional lives and so on, so muchrachas li'es al piat teira b'derech hislapshos, so there a person must engage, and a person has to put their mind into the work that they're doing, because it has to be nasasav and nasata b'emunah. A person has to work and go about their work in a faithful manner, whether they're employed by someone, like we just had in the Torah, how Yaakov describes the level of dedication that he had in his work for Lavan, which halacha derives from that, and how committed a worker must be to their employer, or in any other sort of business where a person has to be invested in the business. So here the milchama is not to disengage, as it is when a person eats, or other tzarchei haguf and other such physical needs where the effort is to technically do it, but to disengage from the pleasure and to focus on doing it l'shem shemaim. Whereas when a person is engaged in their business affairs, a person has to be invested al pitera, and yet at the same time they have to go about it in a proper way. So that is a greater level of milchama. V'yesh so the Rebbe says that we can say that's why, generally speaking, we refer to the avodah of birurim, the avodah of engaging with things of the world, but going about it in the proper way, so that you find the good purpose that's within them, the nitzutz, the kedusha that's within them, and that becomes your focus, and therefore through that it's elevated, and you discard the other aspects of it that can take a person and engage in a way that a person is not meant to go. So the general avodah of birurim is referred to b'shem kanan, because the pirush kanan who's seicher, because the word kanan means someone who does business, like loyed kanani bebeis Hashem and so on. That the word kanan is one who does business. And why is it that we refer to the general avodah of birurim as kanan, as one who does business? Because ki ikar habirurim shebederech hislapshus ubemaso matan, because the exercise of going about your business and doing it properly is the ultimate embodiment of what birurim need to be, where a person is invested and yet they go about it in the correct manner. So v'nimtza, so what we take from the above is shamalchama, the achila, that the malchama that one has when they eat and other such physical needs, hu dugmas, hamalchama b'charev, that is like a malchama waging war with a sword and so on, actual battle, nama pum charbalecha, like the expression that bread is eaten on the edge of the sword, that even though that to wage battle with swords, it puts the enemies, or it puts the one in calamity to the enemy. That's the difference between a sword and shooting a spear or bows and arrows and so on. Where one there, it's from a greater distance, and you shoot over a far distance. Whereas by a charev, the person is in close proximity to the enemy with whom they're engaging. And that's why achila, which we said is an actual milchama, is referred to namapum charba leichel, because a person is engaged in the act, the physical act of eating, or so on. But hare kiruv zehu rak b'mokem. But this proximity is only that physically you have to be close and within arm's reach of the enemy with whom one engages. Mashen kina milchama shebemaso matan. But that milchama that we said is a step further, where because by eating a person is working in doing it properly, a person is working to suppress the taiva of the eating. Whereas when a person does the birur and the milchama of maso matan, of conducting their business affairs, there a person has to be al pitera, invested, and yet do it correctly. So he dugmas hamilchama shnikras b'shem krav, that's even greater and a more intense milchama than eating, which is referred to as cherev, because this is a milchama that we refer to as krav miloshin kiruv, from being extremely close, and in a way that there's a wrestling between the two parties that are waging a battle, and each one envelops the other one. Shakiruv de krav hu leirak b'mokem, because when the closeness of that type of battle is loirak b'mokem, it's not only that they're in close proximity, elo sheshnei aleichem mechabkim zeh, they're in each other's embrace as they seek to wrestle. One seeks to wrestle the other down. Kanal Sefez Baruch has discussed earlier in the Maamer, and so that is the ultimate state of milchama, what we idea of kanan, which is the idea of going about one's business affairs, where a person al piter has to be invested, and yet at the same time has to work and condition themselves to go about it in the proper way. And that's the ultimate state of milchama. So we have varying degrees of milchama, the krav and the cherev shel shalom, and so on. So Podo B'Shalom Nafshi Mikravli Yisayin, and that. So this is what our pasuk says, that Podo B'Shalom Nafshi Mikravli, that shegam avedas habirurim shebederach krav, that even the avedas habirurim, the ultimate engagement in avedas habirurim that we refer to as kravli, which is in not that loirak bederach milchama el bederach krav, that it's not only that it's in a way of doing milchama, and not only in a way of doing milchama of a cherev that you're in close quarters, but in the way of krav where you're fully engaged with the enemy. But even that, our pasuk is telling us, our pasuk Podo B'Shalom Nafshi is telling us that tia boif and Podo B'Shalom, that this as well can be and should be in a way, and will be in a way of Podo B'Shalom, that Shalom betachlis hashlemus ka Shalom shayi b'mei Shlomo, that the ultimate state of Shalom, as it was in the days of Shlomo, which his very name indicates Shalom, as discussed earlier, Ulam Ma'ale Yeser. And when we say B'Shalom in our pasuk, since it gives no qualifiers, so we mean Shalom in its all the way up to and including its ultimate sense, Ulama'ale Yeser, even greater than the Shalom that was in the days of Shlomo, Ka Shalom Shia Lasid Lavoi, that so you can have both, you can have engagement in Birurim, which is so intense that we call it kravli, the ultimate state of milchama, and yet at the same time it's B'Shalom, which is Ka Shalom Shia Lasid Lavoi, the ultimate state of Shalom, as it will be Lasid Lavoi. Vatam lozehu, and how is it that this can be? How can we have this paradox? It's because of it, as the pasuk continues, ki berabim hayu imadi, that the reason is berabim hayu imadi. In other words, shal yedei ho'aveda de berabim hayu imadi, that through a person doing the aveda that is described as berabim hayu imadi, that what is the aveda of berabim hayu imadi? She is seirus v'gili ayechida, that a person taps into and reveals the level of yichida which is within their neshama, kemivor barucha b'drush and al the balagul, as the Mittel Rebbe explains in his Maamer, why it is that the revelation of the yichida which is in the neshama is referred to as rabim hayu imadi, the most encompassing aspect of your neshama, which is the yichida that encompasses the entirety of the neshama. That's why it's rabim hayu imadi dekol echad ve'echad miYisrael b'koichi leiru legalas hayichida shabai, that every single Jew, that even though this is the highest part of the neshama, but every Jew has the capability to arouse, to reveal the yichida that's within them. So when a person taps into this part of his neshama, berabim hayu imadi, so hine al-shalem, that even though he's that even though he's engaged in matters of the world in order to refine and elevate them in extremely close quarters, and not only close quarters but full engagement, and yet at the same time but it will not own him and it won't define him, but rather he will be redeemed from the Inyan Elam getting an upper hand over him. Rather he will succeed in his being mevarer them and being redeemed from them, and in a manner and will be pada in a manner of shalom, vad l'shalom, b'tachlis hashalom, is till the ultimate in shalom, because since he is ma'orer and he reveals the yichida that's within him, so he's able to achieve this, to engage in the ultimate engagement of birurim, and at the same time to go about it in a way of shalom, in the ultimate state of shalom. V'yiseda mizu, and even more so, not only within the person, that the person achieves a state of shalom, but also shegam p'tiyas hanitzutzus shebinyonei olam tiyah b'shalom, even in reference to those things with which the person engages, the p'tiyah of the nitzutzis, that is also b'shalom, that cause berabim hayu imadi, that part of the pasuk refers not only to the level within a person's neshama that they reveal and tap into, but rather, or in addition to that, it also includes the nitzutzis that a person elevates and redeems. Shegam ha-nitzutzis shayut chila b'bchinas rabim. That in what way does this reference the nitzutzis? Because what the pasuk is saying is that even those nitzutzis that initially, before the person engaged with them, we would refer to them as rabim. Ki hayu begalus pershus rabim tori de pruda, because these nitzutzis were lost in matters of the world, that matters of the world before one reveals godliness within them are considered Reshus Harabim, what we call Turei de Pruda, that the mountains of separation, that we have the nitzutzis all over the place, which is a state of Rabim, and then a person engages with them and reveals their purpose and reconnects them to their source and connect to Hashem, and so on. So then Nichlalim B'nishmas Shel Adam Hamevararam, that these nitzutzis then are incorporated into the soul, into the neshama of the person who elevated them and refined them and returned them to their source, that Hayu Imadi. So the Rabim, the many nitzutzis with whom the person engages over the course of doing their Avedas Habirurim, Hayu Imadi, that they stand with the person and they are incorporated within the person, Va'ad Shem Nichlalim by Yechida Shabai, and they're incorporated to the person till the highest level that's within the person, to the Yechida, that which is the other interpretation of the Varabim Hayu Imadi, of the person revealing the Yechida Shabai. So the two come together, that not only is the person himself in a state of Shalom, but those inyanim of the world with which the person engages also berabim hayimadi are transformed from the state of rabim, from this being all over the place and without a clear connection to Hashem, without being in a rishus hayachid, and by the person engaging with them, he incorporates them within himself all the way to the highest level of his neshama, which is his yechida. Ches v'yesh leimar shezeu gama kasher v'ashaycha shel hagula di Yud Kislev u di Yud Tes Kislev La Pasuk Podo B'Shalom Nafshi. So we can say that this is the connection of the Geula of Yud Kislev and of Yud, which is the Maamer we're learning is based on a Maamer of the Mittler Rebbe, the Geula of Yud Kislev, and Podo B'Shalom Nafshi of Yud Tes Kislev, and that they're both connected. La Pasuk Podo B'Shalom Nafshi Dagam Shapdi Haisab Mikrav. That even though what occurred with the Mittler Rebbe and with the Alter Rebbe, where they were redeemed from a state that can accurately be described as mikrav, that they were there were those who waged war against them, and koilel gamza, this war that was waged against them includes this point. Shamai serbali de hamal shinishlelu shahoyelem yachas shel kiruv, that the meiser came about through people who were Jews, or even closer, more closely connected and related, were participants in bringing about the state of Meiser. That which the Meiser came about through Yidden, or those that can be called as Krav, that have some state of closeness. So Yidid of Itzar Gadol, it's distressing. And Va'afal Pikain, so even though they were put into a Meiser, and even though this Meiser came about in the most distressing of ways, besides the obvious distress of the Meiser itself, it's even more upsetting that it came about through the people that were instrumental in bringing it about. But Va'afal Pikain, so even though there was Kravli, but Va'afal Pikain Oisapdia B'Shalim U'B'Shlemus, but the B'dia, the redemption in both instances was B'Shalim and a complete one. They emerge entirely victorious. And to the point that the B'dia of Yud Tes Kislev and of Yud Kislev is prepares us and prepares the world to the perfection that will be when Mashiach will come. In other words, that through which, as it says, began mainly on Yud Tes Kislev, that although it was what the Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov well before Yud Tes Kislev, but the actual undertaking of Yefutzu Ma'anesecha Chutza in the fullest sense began only after Yud Tes Kislev, uvefrat al yidei aveda shel Baal Hagula de Yud Kislev, and all the more so, and specifically through the aveda of the Baal Hagula of Yud Kislev, the Mittler Rebbe, shafatzes hamayones shel yisab b'ifin shor cheves anor, that he took hafatzes hamayones chutza to a whole other level, and that we describe his teaching in a manner of recheves anor, that he taught it lengthy maimarim, where topics are just things that were discussed in the most succinct form by the Alter Rebbe, or in a somewhat succinct form by the Alter Rebbe. But through the Mittler Rebbe taught them in a lengthy and deeply articulated and explained and so on way. So this is a step and a giant step forward in the Yefutzu Ma'anesecha Chutza. In other words, that he was the Mayon, but the Mayon then was spread in a way of Recheves Hanor, which is a giant step forward in the Yefutzu Ma'anesecha Chutza. So this will bring about, as Mashiach said, that Mashiach will come. That then when Mashiach will come, we'll have the true shalom and the true tranquility, and in the most perfect sense. But those who taste the foods of Shabbos before Shabbos, and similarly with regards to Mashiach, for those who taste that which will be taught by Mashiach, and when Mashiach will come, and we partake in that now prior to his coming, or in anticipation of his coming, that in these last days of Galus we begin to taste that which will be revealed when Mashiach will come, that we're able now to engage in a way of a menucha without anyone disturbing and interfering, and in a way of simcha in the aved of Yefutzu Ma'anesecha Chutza boif and the Meisav Eilach in a way of continuously growing and revealing and sharing more and more light. And in the very near future, we'll merit to that state, which, like the pasuk says, that Laila Kayem Yoyer, the night will shine like the day. V'bias Mashiach tzidkenu, with the coming of Mashiach tzidkenu. So, there we have our Maamer. So just to quickly summarize the Maamer, so it's worth noting, and as follows, that this Maamer is not necessarily considered one of the more complex Maamerim, but yet, if we pay attention to the Maamer, this short, seemingly straightforward Maamer is actually encapsulates really the classic Chassidic journey of a Maamer, both in terms of where we get to, where the Maamer takes us, and in terms of how we get there. And to just summarize that and go over that briefly, because first the Maamer begins with a question of a seemingly unresolvable paradox, right? A pasuk that says, Podo B'Shalom nafshi mikravli kivrabim hayumadi. I'm engaged in war, and yet I'm in a state of shalom, which is paradoxical, and it's seemingly like how do we even begin to comprehend a statement of this nature? And the reason the Chassidus oftentimes asks these types of paradoxical questions is for primarily two reasons. One is because Chassidus has the answer. So it asks the question because it knows the answer. But also, the reason that Chassidus asks this question is because the only way for a person to be open, to go on this journey, to arrive at a whole other perspective, is coming to a complete standstill based on what it is that they understood up until this point. And so that's why it poses this question, and it demonstrates that our understanding bumps into a wall. We don't know how to go further. And once a person has that realization, then they're open and they're ready for where the Maamer will take them. And the Maamer, it's worth noting that the Maamer, really the whole question in the Maamer is predicated on one nukuda, one understanding in the pasuk of Podo B'Shalom nafshi, which is that the interpretation of the pasuk Podo B'Shalom nafshi is not that I engage in a battle, and at the end, once I prevail, I find myself in a state of shalom. So the Maamer, right from the outset, rejects that understanding and insists that the meaning of B'Shalom is that I am in both states at the same time. I'm in the Mulchama and I'm in a state of absolute Shalom. That in truth, why? Why do we have to insist on interpreting the pasuk in a way that leaves us with this difficult question? Why not go the easy route and interpret the pasuk to mean that B'Shalom is that once I'm done with the Verabim Hayu Imadi, the Mikravli, once I'm done waging the battle, once I prevail, then I find myself in a state of Shalom. And if I were to interpret the pasuk that way, everything would be good, and we wouldn't need to go down the road that the Maamer takes us. But actually, the Maamer answers that question without even, just over the course of the Maamer, and by bringing certain points that clarify why we cannot interpret the pasuk that way, which is very straightforward. Because on the one hand, since the pasuk says B'Shalom, without any qualifiers, as we mentioned before, so therefore we must interpret the B'Shalom as being up to and including the ultimate state of Shalom. That the ultimate state of Shalom that the world has known is as it was in the days of Shlomo, which was what we call Kaima Sierra Bashlomusa, the 15th generation of since Yitzias Mitzrayim, when the Jews reached the peak level of where we were as a nation. So that's the greatest Shalom that we knew. And actually the B'Shalom goes even further than that, because again, since it says without any qualifiers B'Shalom, it means ultimate Shalom, and we know that when Mashiach will come will be a greater Shalom and greater tranquility even than during the days of Shlomo. So we know that the pasuk is referring to the ultimate state of Shalom. And we know from a pasuk that to have been in battle and emerge victorious and achieve a peace on the heels of having emerged victorious from the battle does not represent the ultimate state of shalom, because the pasuk says it openly. The pasuk says that Hashem tells David that yes, you want to build the Beis Hamikdash. And when did David want to build the Beis Hamikdash? When Hashem hiniach le mikol evav misaviv, when Hashem brought him to the state of emerging victorious and being in a state of rest on the heels of having emerged victorious from his battles. And Hashem tells him, but since you're a man of war, therefore you're not going to be the one who will build the Beis Hamikdash. Rather, your son, and during his be a man of peace, and during his days there will be peace and tranquility, he will build the Beis Hamikdash. So we see the state of emerging from battle and achieving the rest and the peace on the heels of emerging victorious from the battle does not even come close to the state of shalom of the days of Shlomo. And for sure not to the state of shalom as it will be when Mashiach will come. So obviously that our pasuk, which alludes to and includes the shalom that will be when Mashiach will come, cannot mean peace that emerges after battle, but must mean a whole different type of peace. So then we're back to our paradox. How do we have this ultimate peace while being engaged in battle? And even more so, like the Rebbe explained, that we're not just talking about any battle, we're talking about the ultimate battle that we refer to as mikravli, being not just in close proximity, but being completely engaged with the enemy and wrestling the enemy and so on. And so the Maamer tells us as follows, that a person has various states, two general states that they function on. And a person needs to function and serve Hashem on both, but they are they're two worlds. One is the world of a person as being the person that they are, what we call their naran, their nefesh, ruach, and neshama, the conscious person as they know themselves to be, and even their chaya, which is the makif, the first level of makif, what we refer to as makif hakarev, that makif within the neshama that is tailored to the particular individual, comprises the makeup of the person in its entirety. Now, this being the person as the person that they are, so therefore it's defined within certain parameters, and it comes with certain definitions and limitations, which are primarily that Hashem created a balanced world. As zelu mazeh asalakim. In the created world, there's balance throughout, and that's why in opposition to every aspect and every level of the neshama, you have a klipa that stands opposed to that particular level and manifestation of the neshama, all the way up to and including the level of chaya, that on that level as well, there's also klipa that opposes this level of the neshama. And so, while a person can achieve great levels, serving Hashem through his nefesh, ruach, neshama, and chaya, that which we call b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha, that a person can achieve complete dedication and being invested in his service to Hashem, but a person doesn't even have the capability and is not in a position to escape the klipa that stands in opposition to that particular level of the neshama, whatever level he may be serving Hashem on. So a person can prevail, a person can overwhelm the klipa, a person can even convince the klipa to come around. You can reach the level of b'chol levavcha, you can reach the level of b'chol nafshecha and choose to be meiser nefesh, but at the end of the day, you exist within a framework where there's klipa as well. So therefore, you never really escape what we call milchama. The only point is that the milchama can come in different ways, and it can be in a relative sense. You can be in a more intense milchama, like we say masa or matan. You could be in a less intense milchama, whether it's eating that relatively is intense but less intense, davening, which is milchama but is charev shel shalom, and you can even reach the level of chaya, and you're still in a state of milchama. It's just that chaya is menucha that comes after the milchama, but you're always in a state where the milchama is a reality, and there's no way that the person can escape that reality. So you can't achieve the level of shalom, of menucha be'etzem, of being in a place where there's not even a possibility for milchama, because you are in a place where alongside the creation of your neshama, there's the creation of the klipa that stands in opposition as zelu maseh aselikim. And another byproduct of this is that a person cannot be in both states. Since the milchama is real, the only time you could be in a state of menucha is once the milchama is done. When it's done and you've prevailed, then you could find menucha, which again is only relative menucha because it's all in a playing field where the milchama is real. Is real. But what Chassidus teaches us and what the Maamer then tells us, that you have a whole other aspect to your neshama, which is not the neshama as a nivra, as a being that Hashem created, and which therefore finds itself opposed by an equal level of klipa that is in a position to oppose that level of the neshama. But you have your yechida, that the yechida is the godliness that's within you. That when one reveals this part of their neshama, so what happens is that we have something entirely new, a chiddush happen. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that your mesiras nefesh, there's a chiddush in your mesiras nefesh, meaning that it's not that the only time that a person is in a state that they're prepared to be meiser nefesh is when they tap into their yechida, and prior to that, they're not in a position to be meiser nefesh. That's not the case, because b'chol nafshecha, which is chaya, is also the meaning is to be meiser nefesh. Afilu neitelis nafshecha. You're prepared to be meiser nefesh, but there's a difference between the mesiras nefesh of b'chol nafshecha and the mesiras nefesh of your yechida b'chol moedacha. And the difference is that b'chol nafshecha, we said, is you, and as the created being that you are, tapping into the highest level that you can achieve, which is your chaya. And therefore, what is it that you want? You want to, your commitment to godliness, to Hashem, is so great that you want to be meiser nefesh. It's an expression, the ultimate expression of your mitzias, a great mitzias, but still your mitzias. Whereas when it comes to b'chol meidacha, comes to the mesiras nefesh of yechida, here the person's mesiras nefesh itself is done with bittul. That the mesiras nefesh is not an expression of what the person wants. The mesiras nefesh is an expression of what it is that he cannot do without, that he cannot be separated from Hashem. In other words, it comes from the elikus, not from the person, because the mesiras nefesh itself is done with a bittul. So since this is on this level of yechida, a person opens themselves up to the presence of Hashem, of God, elikus, within their neshama. And the keli for that is the bittul, that the mesiras nefesh itself is bittul, and this is how the person is open to the elikus within, which is within their neshama. So it's only when a person achieves this level that they reach a place that they achieve ultimate bittul of the klipa. Here, there is no klipa that can stand in opposition, because klipa is part of the created world. This is part of the creator that's within the person. And here, there is no klipa. There's the ultimate bittul of the klipa. This is what we call shalom. This is the ultimate state of shalom. The ultimate, where there's no room for milchama. The milchama is not real, because there's no klipa here. So, of course, the milchama is real on the level where the person engages with it. But here, a person has opened up their neshama to a level, to a revelation, to a state where they, and the keli for their opening it up to that state is the bittul that they achieve, and the elikus that then functions and reveals itself through them, that you achieve the ultimate bittul of the nefesh habahamis. And therefore, and at this state and in this level, a person can be and have both at the same time. You could be fully engaged in milchama till the ultimate level of milchama, which is referred to as kravli, and at the same time, the person can be in a state of shalom, because on this level, the milchama is not real. The milchama is one where it doesn't own the person. The person does what Hashem guides and directs and requires the person to do, and yet at the same time, a person is in an ultimate state of shalom. And so this is the journey of our Maamer. This is a brief synopsis of what the Maamer is telling us. And now I just wanted to very, very briefly touch on a point that as we were learning this Maamer each week, we shared a small point in this preparation to Yud Tes Kislev. So very briefly, we spoke the first week, 2 weeks ago, about how in Chassidus the anticipation itself is not just a means to an end, but it's a state that's an end in and of itself. We spoke about last week how Chassidus achieves, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, the redemption of the Jewish person and the redemption of Hashem himself, Kilu Padani Liu Levanei Mibein Ha'umes, and the rehabilitation of the world, like based on the pasuk that we said, V'yashav Hayom Lifnei Speaker Le'isonai Litnoi, that the world finding a path to participate fully in realizing the purpose that for which Hashem created it is rehabilitated and returns Le'isonai to a healthy state. And we explained how the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, because like it says, the Baal Shem Tov taught us what can be, and the Alter Rebbe taught us how it can be, that why Simcha is such an integral part of this Torah of Chassidus, both in terms of the teaching that Hashem is always present, whether Hashgacha Pratis or Leilam Havai Dvarcha Nizeh B'Shamayim, and we're always in the presence of Hashem. And every place, everything, every event is all with Hashem fully present within it and orchestrating it and so on. And in the presence of Hashem, one is in a state of simcha. And also because Chassidus resolved the long-standing existential question of how you reconcile the different aspects that are within the person, within the world, the kedusha and the klipa, and the godly revelation of Chassidus showed us how to go about that in a way that utilizes all aspects of the challenge. That means the neshama and the chaymer, kisira chamer seinacha, like the famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, and ein lecha simcha kataras hasfekes. Chassidus brought great relief and joy to the world by showing this path and by resolving this long-standing doubt and uncertainty as to how to go about reconciling all the different things that a person encounters over the course of their life. So just to touch on one last aspect as we close out this preparation for Yud Tes Kislev, and before we wish everyone a good Yontif and so on in relation to Yud Tes Kislev, is one last point, which is a genius aspect of the Chassidic thought, which is not genius like in a calculated sense, but genius because this is a godly revelation, and it opens our eyes to things that on our own we would never realize, which is as follows: that in addition to that which Chassidus teaches, that what happened by Matan Torah, where even though the Avos Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and so on before Matan Torah kept Torah in all its great detail, but they were not in a position, they were not able to have the holiness that's accomplished through the mitzvahs permeate the world. There was a gzeira, a decree, a separation between Elyenim and Tachtenim. And it's only as a result of Matan Torah that the holiness of a mitzvah can permeate the physical thing with which the mitzvah is done. And especially taking into consideration that which Chassidus teaches, that Tzimtzum is not kipshutai, that Hashem hasn't removed himself and is not sitting in some far away place where as some other people thought, which Hashem is absolutely capable of removing himself and from that perch watching and controlling every detail of the world. But Chassidus teaches that it's not the case, but rather that Hashem is fully present within the world. Which means, for example, that when we learn about something becoming holy, it's not just a din of it becoming holy, but it's a metzius of it becoming holy. It's a reality because Hashem is present within, and so on. So in addition to all of that, there's another very profound aspect of the Chassidic thought, which is as follows: that in our relationship to Hashem, there's two parts to it. There's seeking Hashem, and there's finding Hashem. We call Ratzi and Shev. So we seek Hashem, we believe in Hashem, we know He's real. Shem Shamayim Shagar B'fi Kol. We don't begin to comprehend what He is, but we long to be connected to Him. That is our love for Hashem in seeking Hashem. But the question is, where do we find Hashem? So the revolution of Chassidus is the profound contribution of Chassidus is that we find Hashem in tangible things around us. For example, Chassidus elevates the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael and makes it primary. And even though there are three loves, there's Avos Hashem and Avos Yisrael and Avos HaTorah, but we begin with Avos Yisrael. That Chassidus raises the importance of Avos Yisrael. And what is Avos Yisrael? Chassidus explains that when you love a Jew, and you love the neshama that's within the Jew, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Lamed Beis and Tanya, that's really the only way that a person can achieve true Avos Yisrael, that they make nafsh mikra and gufim tefela, and your soul connects with the soul of the other person. So the soul that's within the other person is part of Hashem. So in loving that other Jew, you're loving Hashem. And because banim atem l'Hashem elokeichem, Jews are Hashem's children. So if you love the Father, you love the children. So loving another Jew is loving Hashem. And so much so, not only is loving another Jew loving Hashem, loving another Jew is greater than loving Hashem. Like it says in Ayemim, the Alter Rebbe says that Avos Yisrael is greater. Why? Because Ahavti Eschem Amar Hashem, Amar Avaya. Hashem says, I love you, and you're Oihev Masha Ohuv Oihev. You love that which the Ohuv is Oihev. You love that which He loves, which means, very simply, that loving Hashem is wanting to be connected to Hashem. Loving a Jew is being Hashem. Because Hashem loves a Jew, and when you love a Jew, you're being Him. He loves Jews, you love Jews. Or like the Rambam explains, that in relation to Purim, that when you give tzedakah and so on, you're doima l'shchina, you're like Hashem. So Chassidus sees in the Avos Yisrael not just a mitzvah, not just treat the other person like you treat yourself, not just a way that a person is meant to conduct themselves, but it's an entire state and perspective of how you see the other person, and it gives voice to how you feel in relation to Hashem, and how you're connecting to that person and to Hashem. How? Through loving that person, and that person is real and tangible in front of you. And so here we seek Hashem wherever He may be, but we find Him in something real in front of us. And similarly, it comes to the fulfillment of mitzvahs. That not only do we bring holiness into those things with which we do a mitzvah, and not only do we find a spark within that object with which we do a mitzvah, and we elevate that spark by doing a mitzvah, and that spark is rooted in a very high level that's even higher than our neshama. It comes from Toyu, which is higher than Tikkun, and by elevating it, it elevates us, and so on. But also, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Igeres HaKodesh, the physical, the Yesh Hagashmi, is created, that capacity to create Yesh Ma'ayin is only Hashem Himself, Atzmas Umuhus, who doesn't owe His existence to any Hashem doesn't owe His existence to any being other than Himself. Hashem is the beginning of everything, and therefore He's able to create Yesh Ma'ayin. He's able to create those beings that feel they don't owe their existence to any being outside themselves. Like the Alter Rebbe explains at length in Igeres HaKodesh. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe says that when the Chassidim heard and learned that the Igeres HaKodesh of the Alter Rebbe, it brought a whole new excitement into the fulfillment of mitzvahs, because we engage with something physical. That's most mitzvahs require engaging with something physical, and in that physical is present Hashem Himself, who is the only being capable of creating Yesh Ma'ayin. So again, where do we find Hashem? It's not just the aspect that there's a commandment and we fulfill the commandment, which is absolutely the most important aspect, but it's also that in that physical, tangible item with which we do the mitzvah is present Hashem Himself, and that's part and what's incorporated in the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And so this is that genius and profound contribution of Chassidus, that you find Hashem in the tangible all around you. And anyway, with that we conclude, and want to wish everyone, as is the tradition, and it's a Brodna Yem Yem, Aksivach Simateva, Lashana Teva, Belimad Chassidus, V'darka Chassidus, Tikasevu, V'sechasemu. Thank you.
Hey, lichtig und warm, hey, lichtig und warm, hey, mach lichtig und warm, rum sich, hey, lichtig und warm, hey, der Rebbe ist der Vayach, mach lichtig, Vayach, lichtig und warm, hey, lichtig und warm, hey, lichtig und warm, hey, mach lichtig und warm, rum sich. Vaya